Dear President Schlögl, thank you very much for the very kind introductory note. Dear Federal Minister Özdemir, dear awardees, dear colleagues and guests and friends. It is a pleasure and thank you for inviting me to speak at this very special event of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. First, I wish to wholeheartedly congratulate this year's awardees. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to join you at this special moment in your career and life. Congratulations. And today I want to invite all of you on a journey to explore humans' potential for goodness. Homo homini lupus est. This Latin proverb, meaning man is a wolf to man, depicts a rather dark side of human nature, including cruelty, violence, and aggression. Sigmund Freud, one of the founding fathers of clinical psychology, concluded in Civilization and Its Discontents that no one, through their life experiences, could possibly deny the inherent destructiveness of human nature. Certainly, this gloomy conclusion is colored by his own experiences of World War II, forced migration, and the disaster that the Nazi regime created. While aggression is part of human nature, today I will show that humans also are inherently social creatures. With this comes our infinite potentiality for goodness and our capacity to move beyond the mere defense of self-interest and protection of in-group interests and resources through force and power. Today we live in an age of division, and our potential for malignity is inevitably visible every day as we navigate the news and in many parts of the world in daily life. Global connectivity contributes to political, social, and economic instability, and humanity is threatened by climate change, loss of biodiversity, and natural disasters. Given these challenges, it may come as no surprise that data from Germany and the European Union reveal a mental health crisis in children and adolescents, which has not recuperated since the end of the pandemic. Given the scope and magnitude of challenges, it may seem naive to speak about our potential for goodness. Yet every crisis yields the possibility for transformation. And today I want to argue how this time provides an unprecedented opportunity to transfigure our potential for goodness. Technological progress and the very connectivity that bears risk also offers extraordinary possibility to expand our capacity for kindness and care. Through this, we can create strong foundations for healthy and productive life trajectories and express through lived action altruism, or, in the words of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Albert Schweitzer, reverence for life. If it is possible to identify the roots of our goodness, expressed in respect for the dignity of every human being and all living entities, and in a willingness and capacity to help other living beings thrive, our species would be well equipped to tackle the challenges ahead of us. In other words, how do we become kind as a species? So let's take a look at this 4-year-old boy. He's playing a game called the dictator game, which has been developed by economists to assess how individuals respond to situations where self-interest and equality are opposed. In the game, the boy decides if and how many stickers, an attractive resource for 4-year-old children, he wants to share with an anonymous boy of his age. So let's take a look.
Okay, so go. You can decide if you want to give them some stickers or not. No. Okay, so put them in. If you don't want to share, put them in there. You can just put them here from the top. There you go. Okay.
So as you can see, the boy is not willing to share any stickers. Luckily, we know from many studies around the world that this tendency for self-interest changes from early to middle childhood, and most individuals tend to share half. At the Humboldt Science Center for Child Development at Leipzig University, we study such developmental processes that are involved in our roots and our potential for goodness across disciplines and institutions, including Leipzig University, two Max Planck Institutes, the Center for Scalable Data Analytics and AI, and many others. The core team consists of over 50 members by now from 20 disciplines and 25 nations, which is great fun to work with. And the professorship really has made it possible to create this unique network of international researchers at different career levels across disciplines and bring us closer to this fascinating question of how we can transform our potential for goodness and how this knowledge translates into innovative interventions and policy advice. So what do we know about the development of goodness? Let's take a look at sympathy or empathy. Here on the slide, you can see some data from a 3-year longitudinal study where children, parents, and teachers reported on the child's level of empathy at age 6, 7, and 9. Using a person-centered approach, we identified 3 groups of children, as you can see there. One who showed sympathy from early on and remained stable. A second group who strongly increased their sympathy score across development, and a smaller group who remained stable low. So there is tremendous variability when it comes to the development of empathy from early on. So one reason why some children express empathy at an early age while others don't seem to care is their cognitive capacity to focus. Let's listen to a story we showed to children of different ages and nations to see how they respond.
Your teacher is giving out lollipops, and many students are waiting in line. You're standing behind the child in the purple shirt.
All right, what happens next? Let's take a look.
As you get near the front of the line, you see that there is only one lollipop left. You push the child in front of you out of the line and get the last lollipop.
And then the child is being asked, how would you feel if you had done that? And simultaneously, we use eye tracking to explore if the child is looking to the object of self-interest. This is the really great-looking lollipop on the right, or the victim's face, the other-oriented cue. So let's take a look at how this 4-year-old girl responds.
If you were to do that, how would you feel?
Good.
And why would you feel good?
So
Is
she
there
would
anything
feel
else
really
you would
good.
feel?
So she said she would feel really good because then she could eat the lollipop. And now you can see the eye tracking of a child on the next slide, which is mostly showing self-interest. So take a look at the pattern. So you can see it's not only looking at the lollipop, this child, it's looking at the peers. But you know, the majority of the time the child is looking at the lollipop. So here are the findings of one study where we utilized structural equation modeling to analyze the links between children's attentional orientation and their expression of such emotions. And what you can see here on the right is that the more children attended to such other-oriented cues, which is the face of the victim rather than the self-serving one, which would be the lollipop, the more they say that they would feel sad and that it's wrong to transgress such in such scenarios. So in other words, what we focus on determines how we feel. Similarly, as we know from cognitive neuroscience research, body states inform emotional feeling states. Here are some findings from a unique longitudinal study where we investigated children's physiological responses to such stories, their reported emotions, and their aggressive behavior. Children whose heart rates became more reactive to transgressions over 3 years showed corresponding decreases in aggression over the same period. So this kind-heartedness at the biological level develops with age, and the more children develop it, the more kind they become to others. Or, in other words, our heart rate can tell us how we feel. So what do we know about the consequences of being kind? Here are some data from a large-scale representative longitudinal study with over 1,000 children, their caregivers, and teachers participating. Using bivariate second-order latent curve modeling, we found that an increase in empathy over 6 years, from age 6 to age 12, led to a decrease in aggression, as indicated by the significant slope score on the right. So kindness has a positive impact on children's mental health and can contribute to reduce mental health problems in the population. So, there's promising evidence that we have potential to become helpful and kind. What happens now if environments are unkind and we face significant adversity, such as war-related trauma, conflict, and violence? We have studied this in a series of investigations and different populations exposed to war, violence, and conflicts in the family and school environments. And sometimes what exposure to trauma means is often expressed through poetry and art. Let me quote Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. "We need to sit on the rim of the well of darkness and fish for fallen light with patience." In one study with Syrian refugee families, we looked at the effects of exposure to war and pre-migratory trauma, including loss of family members, exposure to violence, and separation from close caregivers on children's mental health. We found that adversity had an impact on children's aggressive behavior, but only if they did not show high levels of emotion regulation. So if children are able to regulate themselves, that can buffer the negative effects of exposure to trauma on mental health. Together, these are just some snapshots into what we know about the roots, antecedents, and consequences of kindness. How can we now use this knowledge to identify strategies and practices to nurture kindness and contribute to the betterment of society? In other words, how can we use the science of child social and emotional development to uncover kindness? The first step, of course, is to see it and pay attention and make it visible. So just as we have to understand biodiversity, I have argued that we also need to understand psychodiversity. And we have developed a tool called the Social Emotional Resilience Test to make the diversity in children's capacities for kindness and caring visible at the individual, community, and even nations levels. It is widely used across ages and countries. And you can see here on the left an individual profile highlighting a child's unique strengths in empathy. These strengths can be used to promote the child's development and potential. The classroom map on the right shows the potential of a classroom, highlighted in green, that can be used to develop a group's positive functioning in educational settings, for example. And this matters really because we have seen how such potential influences children's mental health, well-being, and ability to learn and thrive. To promote children's kindness comprehensively, I proposed a holistic, interconnected, meta-theoretical framework called the Web of Care. It emphasizes that caring children are embedded in caring relationships, in caring communities, which are part of the natural environment and the cosmos. In the Alexander von Humboldt Research Group for Child Development, we do develop intervention approaches that are tailored to address each child's developmental needs and that are embedded in caring relationships, acknowledging the inherent interconnectedness of our development with that of our significant others. One approach that we developed called RAISE is an evidence-based intervention for caregivers, educators, and children. It focuses on central dimensions of kindness, and as you can see, it includes 3 modules that can be flexibly used by parents, teachers, and children themselves with a focus on kindness, caring relationships, and well-being and the personal growth of caregivers. In our most recent work, we also developed interventions that use AI to promote goodness. This was in response to the lack of social-emotional learning integration in schools. In addition, educators, as we know, are often responsible for too many children and lack the time and resources to implement evidence practices in this area. In cooperation with Humboldt Professor Shayan Mukherjee, we developed pedagogical conversational agents. Those are digital avatars or puppets capable of holding conversations in educational contexts. They could be leveraged to reduce the educator burden and personalize learning to meet the specific needs of each child. So here's our pedagogical conversational agent called Peace, which is an AI-powered puppet that we have trained to deliver lessons alongside an educator. We fine-tuned the AI using evidence-based pedagogical and developmental frameworks. Peace is presented to children as a digital monkey avatar named Yuku, which means god of weather in Estonian mythology, and Yuku's emotions control the weather in his jungle. Yuku takes the children on an adventure through Yuku Land to help them master social and emotional skills. Here you can see what children experience. It's a screenshot of what they see at the beginning of the training. And in the screenshot, you can see that Yuku is feeling fear. You can see that the fog is developing around him in the jungle to symbolize this. And the child is learning how to recognize that in his face and in his body language. So, and here on the left is essentially the systems that convert children's speech to text so it can be fed into the large language model itself, and a system to convert text back to speech and make Yuku sound as natural as possible. On the right is a schematic of the backend or engine that runs Yuku. Everything on the right we developed in-house. So researchers and educators monitor and evaluate the performance of the agent. Yuku moves and expresses emotions physically and displays the world or background visuals of Yuku's jungle, and he delivers the content of the training. This is very exciting work in progress, and we hope that such interventions can be integrated into regular educational practices in the not-too-distant future. So this brief exploration into our human potential for kindness brings me back to the Latin proverb about the wolf-like part of our nature I began with. Let me end with a Cherokee tale of two wolves. The story goes like this. An old man was teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he told the young boy. A fight between two wolves. One is envy, anger, sorrow, regret, greed, self-pity, arrogance, and false pride. The other is joy, love, hope, truth, serenity, humility, kindness, and generosity. This same fight is going on inside of you, grandson, and inside of every other person on the face of this planet. His thoughtful grandson asked, "Grandfather, which wolf will win?" The wise grandfather smiled and simply said, "The one you feed." Thank you very much for your attention.